Hey, you got a problem?
Leave her alone! What are you gonna do about it?
Bikers messed with a disabled female veteran in a wheelchair. 30 minutes later, Marines showed up. What began with a knock ended with a home, but what happened in between stitched together three shattered souls. Weeks passed. The rain, once relentless, had now gentled into misty drizzles, just enough to make the grass greener, the roses bloom brighter, and the windows shimmer with early morning dew. Inside the mansion, laughter echoed where once there had only been silence. Lily now had her own room, a little princess's heaven, with a canopy bed, starry night lights, and more books than she could count. She often ran down the corridor barefoot, giggling, calling for Uncle Dan, which made Daniel chuckle every time. And hope. She bloomed like wildflowers in sunlight. Gone were the dark circles under her eyes. Gone were the quick glances over her shoulder. She walked the halls now with soft slippers and softer smiles. She had even started taking online classes at Daniel's suggestion. "I just want to feel enough," she'd said one evening. "You already are," he had whispered. One day, Daniel invited her into his late daughter's room. It was untouched, dustless, sacred. Soft pink wallpaper. A half-finished drawing taped to the wall. Hope hesitated. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I want to show you something." He handed her a small music box. It was pale blue, chipped at the corner. "When Emily died," he said, "I couldn't even bear to wind this open. But last night, Lily found it." Hope opened the lid. A quiet lullaby played. Hope's eyes welled with tears. She said, "It sings like Mommy does at night." Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. For the first time. "I didn't cry out of pain. I cried because something in this house was alive again." Smart girl. Hope leaned her head against his shoulder. She was right. Outside, the moon broke through clouds. The sky was clear now. And inside that once cold mansion, three broken hearts found warmth, one born from patience, from pain, and from a plate of food offered under the pouring rain. Inside, Harper was whispering to herself. "Semper Fi, boys, let's see what you do when the real ones show up." Time passed. 15 minutes. Then 20. The bar door creaked open once, letting in a gust of wind, but no one walked in. Still, Harper waited. The bikers were now fully focused on her. They laughed louder, tossed crude jokes like knives, unaware they were ticking down to their own reckoning. But then, something changed. The air in the room seemed heavier. The bartender looked out the window, his hands trembling now. In the distance, headlights appeared, first 2, then 4, then more. But these weren't motorcycles. They were tactical black SUVs with military-grade suspension, their grills dark and angular. Their engines didn't roar, they growled. Inside, no one noticed, except Harper. She didn't smile. Didn't blink. She just whispered, right on time. By the time the bikers turned to look out the windows, it was already too late. Rain now poured in sheets across the parking lot as boots hit pavement. Doors opened in unison. The figures stepping out were all uniformed, not in fatigues, but in black suits, military posture unmistakable. Combat Marines. A brotherhood. And they were here for her. The front door of Iron Jaw Tavern slammed open with a gust of rain and wind, cutting through the laughter like a blade. The jukebox skipped. Glasses trembled on tables. And then they stepped in. 6 men. 1 woman. All dressed in black. Not the type of black you wear for fashion, but the kind soldiers wear when they've buried more friends than they'll ever speak of. Their jackets bore no insignia. Their boots hit the wooden floor like war drums. Their eyes scanned the room like predators who already knew who the prey was. The air turned thick. Time, for a moment, seemed to stall. The lead Marine, an older man with a shaved head and a presence that felt nuclear, walked in first. His name was Master Sergeant Cole Jennings. His jaw was squared, his arms were crossed, and he moved like someone who had walked through Fallujah without flinching. Behind him followed Sergeant Ava Ramirez, a tall, stone-eyed woman with a scar down her cheek and the poise of someone who could dismantle a grown man with a look. Beside her, men with sharp eyes, tight stances, silent discipline. No one spoke. The bikers stiffened, unsure whether to laugh or reach for something under their vests. Cole walked forward until he stood just inches from Harper's table. He said nothing, only looked at her. She gave him a single nod. That was all he needed. He turned slowly to the bar. "Which one of you," his voice rumbled like distant thunder, "thought it was funny to insult a Marine in a wheelchair?" Silence. Deafening. One of the bikers, Tank, they called him, stood from the pool table, puffing his chest. "Hey man, it was just jokes. We didn't know she was one of you." Cole took one slow step toward him. "One of us?" His voice was calm. Too calm. "She gave her leg in a war you stayed home and watched on TV. She shed blood for a country you take for granted. You think you earn the right to joke just because you were too coward to serve?" Tank raised his hands. "Look, man, we didn't mean anything." "I know," Cole said, now toe-to-toe with him. "Because men who mean something never say words like yours." Another biker stood, trying to look brave. "All right, enough of the drama. It's a bar. Everyone gets messed with here. Don't turn this into some military parade." Cole turned his gaze slowly. "A bar. You're right. This is a bar. But that woman," he pointed at Harper, who still sat silently, hands folded. "That woman gave more for this country than you'll give in your entire lifetime of beer and empty noise." Ava Ramirez took a step forward. "When we heard her call, we dropped everything. Because Marines don't abandon each other, not in war, not in peace, not when they're in a chair and being mocked by cowards." The bartender, now visibly sweating, tried to speak. "Yes sir, we didn't know. I tried to warn them." Cole looked at him. "You did nothing. And that's all it takes for evil to win." Then he turned to the entire room. "Let me be clear. You're not just mocking a veteran. You're mocking service. You're mocking sacrifice. You're mocking every father who never came home. Every mother who wrote goodbye letters before dawn. Every brother who bled in a ditch so you could enjoy freedom." One of the younger bikers tried to leave. A Marine stepped in front of the door, arms folded. "No one leaves," Ava said coldly. "Not until you've heard everything." The tension rose like heat in summer asphalt. Harper finally spoke. "Cole, let them speak." All eyes turned to her. "I want to hear what they have to say now." The men at the pool table, so brave 30 minutes ago, were now quiet, small. Like schoolboys caught with matches and gasoline. Tank rubbed the back of his neck. "We didn't think you were a Marine. You don't look like." Harper's voice was calm but razor-sharp. "Like what?" "Like someone who used to run 6 miles before sunrise. Like someone who held her squad leader's hand while he bled out in Helmand province. Like someone who taught close-quarter combat and can break a man's windpipe in 4 seconds, wheelchair or not." No answer. Just rain slamming against the windows. She took out the photo again. "These people here. Every one of them dead. Suicide, IEDs, gunfire, cancers. But they lived with honor. Not like you." Cole stepped aside to let her words carry. Harper rolled forward just a bit. "You laughed at me. You laughed at the only part of me that still hurts when I try to sleep. You laughed at a war you never fought. But worst of all, you made a room full of people stay quiet while you did it." Someone in the back whispered, "We're sorry." But Harper wasn't finished. "I didn't call them here to beat you up," she said. "I called them because I wanted you to see something you've probably never seen in your entire life, real respect." Ava raised her hand. One by one, the Marines straightened. Then, slowly, each of them lifted their hand to salute Harper. Not just a nod. Not just a look. A full military salute. In silence. In honor. Harper returned the salute with her left hand, because her right was shattered in her final mission. Tears welled in the bartender's eyes. Then it happened. One of the bikers stood. Removed his leather vest. Walked to Harper's table. And placed the vest gently beside her. "I don't deserve to wear this tonight," he said, voice trembling. She looked at him and nodded once. Cole turned to the rest. "You have a choice. Keep laughing at what you don't understand. Or learn what it means to walk, or roll, with purpose." He nodded at Harper. "Semper Fi, sister." "Semper Fi," she replied softly. Then the Marines turned and began to leave, no violence, no threats, just a storm of dignity that silenced everyone they passed. Outside, the rain began to stop. And the world somehow felt cleaner. It had been exactly 18 minutes since Staff Sergeant Olivia Barnes pressed the small red button beneath her wheelchair's armrest. The one hidden behind the brass Marine Corps emblem, an unassuming piece of metal that now glinted under the flickering neon beer sign above the bar's cracked glass windows. Inside the bar, the tension had changed shape. The bikers, still high on their misplaced adrenaline, were laughing louder now. A false bravado. More for each other than themselves. They didn't know why, but something had shifted. The old bartender, George, noticed it first. He wiped down the counter in slow circles, eyes flicking toward the entrance every few seconds. His hands moved automatically, but his mind was elsewhere. He had served enough soldiers, Marines, and veterans in his time to know, sometimes the quiet ones don't stay quiet for long. Especially when they've seen war. Across the room, Olivia remained motionless, a stoic statue of grace and grit. Her wheelchair was turned slightly toward the door. She hadn't said a word since the shove. Since the biker named Deke knocked her coffee to the floor and barked, "Will on out, lady." Her hand, however, still rested on the edge of the table, firm, steady. A single drop of coffee clung to her boot. Her dog tags, barely visible beneath her sweatshirt, caught a sliver of the light. But her face? Her face was unreadable. Not broken. Not afraid. Just, waiting. Beside her, the young man who had come to her defense, Ryan, sat quietly. The insult thrown at him still hung in the air, playing hero for a broken soldier. He looked toward Olivia now, trying to catch her gaze. "What did you do?" he whispered. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. "You'll see," she said softly. "Just give it a few more minutes." Outside, the rain began to ease. The wind calmed. It was that still, eerie quiet that often arrives just before a storm. Outside, the rain began to ease. The wind calmed. It was that still, eerie quiet that often arrives just before a storm. And then, from a distance, barely audible at first, came a low, pulsing rumble. Ryan heard it first. Then George. Deke and the others kept laughing, but the room was already turning its attention elsewhere. The sound grew louder. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't a truck either. It was deeper. More deliberate. Rhythmic. One of the younger bikers stepped toward the window, beer in hand. He peered out into the night, and froze. Guys?" No one responded. He turned back slowly. "There's something coming." Then, a beam of headlights cut through the fog and rain. Bright. Blinding. And from the mist emerged a convoy. 4 dark green Humvees. One black military SUV. All moving in perfect formation. They didn't speed. They didn't hesitate. They just arrived, with the silent, unshakable power of trained force. And then, the lead vehicle stopped. The driver's door opened. Boots hit the wet pavement. First one. Then two. Then 6. Marines. In full service uniform. The bar went silent. Inside, Olivia adjusted her posture. "Showtime," she whispered. Ryan looked at her as though seeing her for the first time. "You called them?" She didn't nod. Didn't blink. "They never really left," she murmured. "You don't stop being family. Even when the world forgets you." The front door of the bar swung open with a burst of cold air. And in walked Major Charles Becker, retired but still carrying the authority of a battlefield commander. His eyes scanned the room. Sharp. Unapologetic. And when they landed on Olivia, they softened. "Sergeant Barnes," he said, standing at attention. "Major," she nodded. "Thanks for being prompt." He smiled. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." The bikers stood frozen, unsure what was happening. Becker turned, finally addressing the room. "I believe someone here thought it was appropriate to lay hands on a decorated war hero," he said, his voice echoing with a commanding calm. "The same hero who carried half our unit out of Mosul in 2010 with 2 bullets in her back." He pointed at Olivia's chair. "She didn't ask to be honored. But you will honor her now." No one breathed. Behind him, more Marines entered. 2 approached Olivia, standing at her side with silent dignity. And then Major Becker stepped forward, addressing the bikers directly. "I won't ask you to apologize. That's your choice. But let it be known, this woman gave you the freedom to mock her. And that's something you'll live with a lot longer than a bruise." Deke finally stepped forward, stammering, "We didn't know." Becker cut him off. "You didn't care. That's worse." The tension cracked like lightning. But Olivia, in her calm strength, interrupted. "Let them be." Everyone turned to her. "I didn't call you to start a fight. I called to remind them who we are. What we stand for. Let them remember this moment." She looked at the bikers, no rage, no bitterness. Just steel resolve. "I'm not your enemy," she said. "I just wanted my coffee." Silence held the room like gravity. And then, almost reverently, one of the younger bikers took off his leather jacket. Slowly walked toward Olivia. And gently set the jacket on the back of her chair. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, voice cracking. "For everything." She nodded. Becker stepped back, motioning to his unit. "Let's go." But one Marine stayed behind. He handed Olivia a sealed envelope. She opened it and smiled faintly. It was an invitation. Marine Corps Veterans Gala. Guest of honor. Finally, she whispered. A seat at the table again. Word traveled fast. It started with a shaky phone video uploaded by a college student who happened to be at the bar that night. She'd hidden in the corner behind the arcade machine when things got tense, but she kept recording. What she captured wasn't a fight, or a dramatic takedown. It was something rarer, honor, restored. In the dim glow of the bar, the footage showed Staff Sergeant Olivia Barnes refusing to retaliate. Refusing to hate. Refusing to break. And then, just as the Marines filed in like ghosts of discipline and dignity, the world began to listen. By morning, the video had been shared over 2 million times. By noon, it was on every major news outlet. And by sunset, Olivia's name was no longer just whispered among her old unit or remembered in a dusty file cabinet at the VA hospital. No, America was speaking it now. Loudly. Proudly. The next day, Olivia sat in her small apartment, a quiet place filled with memories, medals, and folded flags. Her service dog, Max, rested by her side. He hadn't left her since the day she returned home in that wheelchair. On the coffee table, her phone vibrated non-stop. Calls. Messages. Emails. Journalists. Veterans. Strangers. Everyone wanted a comment. A quote. A piece of the story. But Olivia didn't want the spotlight. She wanted something more elusive. Dignity. Peace. Belonging. Then came a knock at her door. She wheeled herself over, opened it, and found a boy, no older than 10, holding a tray of cookies and a folded note. He didn't say much. Just looked up and whispered, "Thank you for protecting my mom. She says you saved people like her." Olivia reached out, touched his head gently. "Thank you for the cookies." As he ran off, she opened the note. It said only 4 words. "You made us proud." By the weekend, the bar where it all happened had changed too. George the bartender, a quiet man with eyes that had seen more than he ever spoke about, decided to do something permanent. He removed the dusty pool tournament plaques from the far wall and hung up a new frame. Inside was a still image from the viral video, Olivia sitting quietly in her chair, Maureen standing tall behind her. The frame was engraved. "For every warrior who fights battles we never see, we see you now." Above it, the bartender mounted Olivia's old unit patch, a gift she mailed him the day after. And beside it, the leather jacket the young biker had left behind. Framed, too. No one touched that wall again. Across the state, veterans started arriving. First one, then another, then dozens. Some came in silence. Others came in wheelchairs. Some brought medals, others brought memories. They weren't here to protest. They weren't here to fight. They came to stand. Quietly. Together. To say without words, "We've been forgotten long enough." A local news station tried to get Olivia on camera as she arrived at the growing vigil outside the bar. But she just shook her head. "I didn't do this," she said softly. "They did. All of them." She turned to a Vietnam vet who traveled 300 miles to be there. His hat was patched with dust and age, but his back was straight. "You okay?" she asked him. He smiled. "Never better, Sergeant." Then came the letters. Hundreds of them. Some from children. Some from other disabled vets. Some from strangers who said they'd never served a day but now saw things differently. One letter, written by a man in hospice care, read, "I watched your video from my hospital bed. I cried for the first time in years. Not because you were hurt, but because you reminded me what we fought for, not parades, not medals, but respect." Olivia kept that one on her nightstand. Then the Pentagon called. A formal invitation. They wanted her to speak at the National Veterans Recognition Ceremony. To tell her story. To represent the voiceless. She hesitated. Public speaking wasn't her thing. Her injuries had left more than physical scars, her voice, sometimes, trembled unexpectedly. But when she told her old commander, Major Becker, about the offer, he simply said, "Olivia, you don't need to speak with words. You already said everything the world needed to hear, by standing still." So she agreed. The day of the ceremony arrived. Washington, D.C. stood still. At the Lincoln Memorial, where the event was being held, an ocean of uniforms and flags stretched across the horizon. Veterans from every war, World War II to Afghanistan, filled the space. When Olivia wheeled up the ramp to the podium, a hush fell. No music. No fanfare. Just silence. Then someone in the crowd began to stand. One by one, thousands followed. And in that moment, in that vast sea of strangers, came a salute that moved mountains. Not a single person spoke. They just stood. With tears. With respect. And Olivia? She didn't cry. She didn't bow. She just nodded. A quiet warrior. A forgotten hero now unforgettable. When the ceremony ended, a young woman approached her. Nervous. Shaking. I was one of the nurses at Walter Reed when you came in. I used to whisper to you when you were unconscious. I told you not to give up. Olivia smiled. I heard you. That night, back in her apartment, Olivia turned on the news for the first time in weeks. Her story was everywhere. But more importantly, so were others. Stories of wounded vets. Caregivers. Silent battles. Quiet strength. For the first time in years, the nation was listening. And in the dark of her living room, as Max curled up by her feet, Olivia Barnes allowed herself something rare. A soft, full breath. And a whisper. Maybe now, they see us. The next spring, something extraordinary happened. Not in Washington. Not on national television. But in a small town in Pennsylvania, where the faded bricks of an abandoned community center were finally being painted again. Volunteers, young and old, rolled out coats of red, white, and blue on its walls. On the side, a giant mural had begun to take shape, the silhouette of a woman in a wheelchair, saluting beneath a sunset sky, with the words, "Honor lives here." That mural wasn't just paint. It was a movement. And it had a name. The Barnes Initiative. It started with a letter from a 13-year-old girl named Emily, who'd watched Olivia's video 100 times. Her father was a disabled veteran too, and for years, she'd watched him struggle in silence, not from his injuries, but from how invisible he felt in his own country. Emily had written, "Miss Olivia, if my dad had seen someone like you on TV earlier, maybe he'd have stood up straighter, even if only in his heart." The letter broke something open in Olivia. She realized something. What happened at that bar wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of everyone else's. Within months, the Barnes Initiative launched across 5 states. It wasn't about parades or headlines. It was about quiet places for dignity. Wheelchair ramps installed at forgotten veterans' homes. Emergency grants for disabled vets living below the poverty line. Trauma counseling for survivors of both battlefields, overseas and at home. And it was all funded, at first, by strangers. A retired truck driver in Idaho who donated his savings. A waitress in Nebraska who gave up her Christmas bonus. Even the reformed biker, yes, him, showed up one day in Olivia's inbox. His name was Chase. He'd disappeared after that night at the bar, but he'd never forgotten what happened. His message read, "I grew up angry. Thought showing off was power. You taught me power is how you treat someone when no one's watching. I'm not that guy anymore. Please let me help." She did. Chase became one of the first volunteers. He traded his cut-off sleeves for a tool belt and spent every Saturday repairing wheelchair ramps across the state. The media eventually moved on. The hashtags faded. But the work didn't stop. Because now, when Olivia rolled down the street, in her same old chair, with Max walking ahead like a shadow of loyalty, people didn't look away anymore. They nodded. They offered a hand. They asked questions. They listened. And one morning, on the anniversary of the bar night, Olivia was invited to speak at the White House. This time, she said yes. The East Room was quiet as she rolled to the podium. No one dared cough. No one dared interrupt. She began. "I didn't join the Marines for attention. I didn't come back expecting a parade. But I believed, in my bones, that if I gave this country everything I had, someone would remember that I mattered. That's all most veterans want. To know their pain had a purpose. To know their silence is not abandonment. To feel seen. She paused, breathing slow and steady. I'm not a hero. I'm just a mirror. A reflection of thousands of others still waiting to be heard. And then she told the story, the one that started it all. The bump. The bar. The biker. And the Marines who came not to fight, but to stand. She ended with one line that echoed for years. When I rolled into that bar, I thought I was alone. But 30 minutes later, my country walked in. After the speech, the president stood. And in front of cameras, politicians, and generals, he saluted her. But Olivia did not salute back. She simply placed her hand over her heart, and whispered to herself. This is for the forgotten ones. Back in her hometown, that mural grew larger. New names were added every week. Stories emerged from every corner of the country, of veterans who found their voices again, not because of Olivia's strength, but because she reminded them they never lost it. And when a national holiday was proposed, Veterans Visibility Day, to be held every year on the date of the bar incident, Olivia was asked how she wanted it remembered. She said, "Don't make it about me. Make it about the guy who served 2 tours and now sleeps in his car. Make it about the woman who lost her leg and still shows up to coach Little League. Make it about the ones who carried a flag, and now carry trauma no one can see." And so it was. In her final interview, years later, Olivia sat beneath the same mural, older now, softer around the eyes, but still unbreakable. When the journalist asked her what changed the world, she smiled. Not the Marines who showed up. Not the bar fight. Not the speech. But a moment. A moment where someone looked at me and said, "You matter." That's all it takes. She looked out toward the crowd forming again that day, young kids in school shirts, old men in Vietnam caps, teens on skateboards holding tiny flags. "One woman rolls," she whispered, "so others can rise."